And she's like, oh man, like you work from home. Like I want to have a job like you. You know what I mean? But like what she's seeing is like years of work allowing me to sit in this room and stay home and have conversations with people. You know what I mean? Like she didn't see me up on Saturday at 2 o'clock in the morning being on call, deploying software and doing this and doing that, right? Like, you know what I mean? She didn't see all of that, right? So I'm like, yo, I'm like, if you want to get here, like you got 10 years.
Yep.
You know what I mean? If you want to do what I do and be in the position that I'm in, you got 10 years, right? And again, that's not to deter or to scare anybody, but the fact of the matter is like, you have to put in the effort.
Hey, Cecil, thanks for coming on the show today.
No, man, it's been a pleasure. And you know what? I feel like me and you have been going back and forth so long to try and make this happen. So, you know, I'm glad I could make it and we can finally have this conversation, you know?
Great. Yeah. Tag your it finally. And so tell us a bit about where you're living at the moment in the world and what you're sort of working on.
Sure. I'll give for folks that don't know me, I'll give you a little bit of background. So originally I was born in Antigua. Lived in Antigua until I was about like 19, came up to Florida for college. And I've just kind of been in Florida ever since. You know what I mean? I went to Florida Institute of Technology, just like yourself. You know what I mean? Got some degrees there. Studied computer science, software engineering, like those types of things. Because that's really what my passion is. Just trying to build the machine or bend the machine to my will. You know what I mean? This has always been like something that's been really exciting for me to kind of focus on. And, throughout time, oh, I'm sorry, let me turn that off. Throughout, my career, I've had an opportunity to work at a lot of interesting places. And I think that has helped me develop a lot of perspective, which I think is important. But, throughout time, I've been able to work in education. I've worked in finance. I've worked in developer productivity. I've been a teacher. I've done podcasting. I've done videos. I've done a lot of different things. And, right now, I think a lot of that kind of just helps bring me to the position that I'm in right now, which right now I'm currently at Stripe, doing developer advocacy and trying to build out what hopefully will be seen as some of the best developer advocates in the world. Like that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it. Nothing I do is going to be half, right? Like if I'm going to do it, it has to be the best of everything. So, that's kind of just the focus that I have right now with like, the job and the team and all of that.
Great. So tell us a bit about Stripe for maybe those who are not too familiar with Stripe, especially in the Caribbean region. In addition, sort of what is developer advocacy?
Sure. So I'll start off with what is Stripe. So Stripe, their mission statement is to increase the GDP of the internet, right? And so what does that mean, right? When you think about how the internet is so pervasive today, right? Like almost everything that we do happens online, it happens on the internet. And because of that, I'm going to use a very cliche term, right? Like it's made the world a lot smaller, right? It's allowed us to connect with each other in a way that we really haven't been able to over time. And, one of the important aspects of that has always been commerce, right? Like e-commerce, you think about international exchange, you think about like the buying and selling of goods, not just from like, the shop down the street, but you think about like, hey, I want to do this on a larger scale, like across countries and continents and things of that nature. And so the mission of Stripe is to make that easier, and not only easier for big corporations, but for anyone. So it might be, Mark, maybe one day you say, hey, you want to start selling books, right? And you want to self-publish. You know what I mean? Like, how can we enable you to do that? Maybe you might have folks that maybe they're content creators, or maybe, they're teachers or whatever the case is, right? Like, how can we enable everybody to be able to remove some of that difficult administrivia and just make it easier for us to be able to, set up subscription services, buy and sell goods online and all that types of stuff. And I think one of the reasons too, like, again, as a Caribbean person that really connects to me is because I've always felt like the Caribbean has been prime for e-commerce. Right. We talk a lot about like, you think about the history of the Caribbean, right? And you think about what we are and what we do or what we've done. We made sugar and rice and like all these types of things, right? Like we export and import goods and services, right? Even you think about tourism, right? Tourism is an import-export. You know what I mean? Like we're importing these people, you know what I mean? And we're kind of giving them our services just in a different type of way. And for me, e-commerce is such a thing that would be huge if we could really dial into it, not just as individual islands, but like as a collective, to try and see, how can we kind of come together and use this economic power to kind of take over. So what Stripe does, Stripe takes the approach of a developer first perspective, right? If you think about the world today, like software developers are like gold today. Because again, like the internet is very pervasive. And so we need engineers and people. We need technical folks that can plug into that world and, enabling it for everyone else. Right. So again, like you might be an author, or you might be someone that, I don't know, maybe you build furniture or do sculptures or does painting. You know what I mean? But now you have to ask the question, oh, how do I set up a website? How do I build a mobile app? How do I set up my business to be able to send and receive money? But I want to do it in the digital world. Like, how do I do these things? And this is where our software developers really kind of come in and help to do those types of things. So Stripe takes a very developer first perspective.
I see.
How can we make it very easy for developers to enable payment features inside of their applications, and then by rights also helping their customers achieve whatever goals it is that they have?
Yep.
Now, so that's what Stripe does in 10-second nutshell kind of thing. If we think about advocacy now, developer advocacy, which is a position that I've held for a couple of years now, is, I like to think about it as a job of empowerment and a job of teaching. And again, you think about engineers, right? Engineers are stereotypically very introverted people. We don't, I don't think most of us come out and say, oh, I want to be a teacher. I want to go teach math or science or whatever the case is. But I noticed for most of us, as we kind of progress through our careers, and when we get to a point where we're not just the mentees, but we become the mentors, right? Like we have to impart our years of knowledge on people. You get into this mindset of, hey, I need to share this and I need to teach it to other people. One, not just to tell them how to do things, but also tell them the things that failed for us, right? Like what are the mistakes that we made, and kind of pass on that history. You know what I mean? And I think, again, when you think about like engineering history, no one's really telling that story, right? Like at least not yet. And so developer advocates for me are those folks that, they tell the story, but they also teach, they empower, and they make sure that, folks that are building their next business, or, working for whatever company, or, building cloud and mobile apps and those types of things, have the tools and the knowledge that they need to be able to be successful. So again, if you look across different companies, right? Because most companies have an advocacy team in some incarnation.
Yes.
You think about companies like MongoDB or Twilio or, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Their job is to go out and, find out, well, what are the things that their community needs, their customers need? But again, not just from a sales perspective, but from hey, like, what are the problems that you really have? Like, how are we making things harder or easier for you? And then kind of bring that back inside, bring that internal feedback, and kind of work with the teams, the engineering teams, the planning, things of that nature. So folks could understand, okay, well, we need to prioritize this as we're going through our development cycles. And then once those things are ready, now we can come back out and be like, hey, well, let me share with you the things that we've built for you. And let me show you how the decisions that we've made are shaping technology for the future and are going to help you build apps easier, faster, more, in a more secure way, in a more stable way.
Great. And I think before I had met you back at the conference, we kind of went to school together, and we sort of linked up at a conference, and you tell me about developer advocacy. I was like, what the hell is this man talking about?
Yeah.
I could go to a conference and talk to people and help people build things, but I'm not necessarily a software engineer on an engineering team, just cranking away code, never speaking to people. So I think for folks that have that extrovert-like personality, but you still want to do tech, developer advocacy is quite an interesting role. And so we do this show to encourage people from the Caribbean region to pursue what we're going to call data-driven careers. And the show is called Caribbean Data Science Podcast, but one of my intentions is to remind everyone that you said, bend the machine to my will, and something that resonated from the fact that we can't do machine learning without all of the software engineering under the hood, right? We just without that data infrastructure, data flowing, serving all our models to make all these cool decisions.
Yeah.
So what do you think the role of tech and machine learning has to play in the Caribbean's future? And what should people listening, both from all the way as teenagers up to professionals now, because in different shapes and forms, they'll be affected. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the outlook?
Sure. I'm gonna give you like a very abstract answer to that question.
Okay.
I think every step in my life has been about perspective. You know what I mean? Like when I was in Antigua and I was building a vision for what the future looked like, you know what I mean? It was based on the things that I saw around me. You know what I mean? And so at the time, so we're talking 99, 98, right?
Okay.
People at home that I saw that were doing anything with computing was like fixing printers and running cable, and you know what I mean? Like that's what they were doing. You know what I mean? Like the printer break, and my parents called the guy on the phone. He come and he do what he do, and you know that's. So from my perspective, that's what computing was. It was people plugging in cables and you know what I mean, like fixing printers. And again, at the time in '99, like that was exciting. It was new and it was different for me because that's, you know, like I didn't grow up with computers in high school. I didn't have that. So, so this is still a new and interesting thing for me. And now you kind of fast forward today, you know, as you kind of see where computers have gone, you know what I mean? And I've kind of gone along that journey, right? So like I left Antigua and I come to Florida Tech in Florida. And not only am I exposed to the full capability of the industry, but I'm also meeting different people.
Yes.
Right. The reason that story is important is because it's about perspective, right? Because now I have a different perspective about what the capability of the machine is. You know what I mean? Now I'm understanding, oh, okay, well, I don't have to just plug in cables and fix printers. I could do something different, right? And then, you know, I think about after I graduate and I move into that professional world, again, I'm making another transition. I'm getting perspective, right? Like, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is how people outside of academia are actually practically building and pragmatically putting solutions together and solving problems. And, you know, I think about going even further past that. You know, I was able and I've been blessed to be in a position where, you know, software and technology is taking me all over the world. You know what I mean? Yeah. Software has taken me to Africa. It's taken me to Amsterdam. I've been to Mexico and like all over the globe, right? Again, perspective. And I'm saying that not because, you know, I want to tell people I travel a lot, but I tell that because a lot of the times when we look at technology, we look at the career, we don't really understand what the capability is. I never thought when I left Antigua that I would be eventually traveling the world doing computing, right? I thought I was going to be plugging in cables at home. And now as you kind of go through life and you see different things, you're able to understand like that the picture is bigger than you realize, right? And so again, I'm telling this long story because for folks in the Caribbean, it's very important for us to just look beyond what's inside of our bubble. You know what I mean? Like I said earlier in this conversation, I think the Caribbean is prime for e-commerce, right? And e-commerce, not just within the region, but across the world. Right. Like that is a bigger picture, you know what I mean? Versus like me selling you, you know, I don't know, whatever I'm selling you and you live down the street. Right? Like I'm talking about worldwide economic empowerment. Yes. And I think that's the way that we kind of have to start looking at things. You know, I think about like other things that we've exported out of the Caribbean that we really don't get credit for. I think about like our music, for instance. You know, I was reading this thing the other day, and dancehall is a multi-billion-dollar business. What? Right? Across the world, right? You look at, you know, concerts that happen in the UK and in China, Asia, things of that nature. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. I don't know any billion-dollar dancehall artists. Right. Again, like we're exporting our things, but we don't really always maximize on the potential, right? Like the money doesn't come back to us. It goes out and it doesn't come back in. Yes. And so again, I'm talking about like these economic systems because I think we need to look at us again as Caribbean people, regardless of whether you live in the island or not, or your family's from there, or whatever the case is. We need to look at it from a future perspective of, you know, where can we take this going forward? You know what I mean? Maybe, I don't know, maybe you are a party promoter, right? Like how can technology and things like Stripe and the cloud and those types of things empower the services that you're trying to give to your customers, right? And again, your customers are not just the people that are in the country trying to buy your ticket. Your customers are the tourists that are planning months in advance that are like, yo, Trinidad Carnival in February, you going or what, right?
Yeah.
Where are we going? Oh, let me go and pull up this app. Let me go and pull up Mark's app and let me see all of the different events that are there. Let me go and prepay, you know what I mean, with whatever mechanism that I have. Let me go ahead and reserve my things ahead of time, you know what I mean? But then we have to be able to enable them with that experience and that quality of service. And so that's where technology comes in, right? Again, being able to look beyond like our bubble or what we think is good enough, right? Like let's extend beyond that and like look at a more global scale to try and understand. So for people that in the islands now that are thinking about technology and thinking about, how can I get involved and what can I do? Just think about whatever it is that you're doing today. There's always a bigger play, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so just start with the things that you think are important and helpful, and then kind of grow beyond that, right? And I'll also add to that too. I know a lot of folks that are in tech that don't have technology degrees, that don't have formal training. A lot of my coworkers in a previous job had degrees in biology and psychology and literature and all these types of things. And they were some of the most impactful people when it came to making decisions for software. Because again, it's about perspective, right? I'm always going to go back to that perspective. The reason that's important is because we need people that have these different mindsets and these different visions about how the world works to kind of come together and help us make a solution. Because if we treated it like the government, right? And like only certain people can make decisions, then, the world's only going to look a certain way. You know what I mean? Like we have to be able to open it up a little bit and have all of our opinions there. And again, you probably, and again, you're a data science person, so you probably understand the importance of having data, right? And data, not just in terms of like, hard drives of information, but also the data that's inside of your brain, right? Like the perspective that's going to help you make the decisions or share the opinions that are going to shape the way that we kind of look at the future of the world and technology and how we apply it to the region.
Absolutely. I wanted to piggyback off your perspective thread. And I think as a data scientist, you're watching all the robotics, you're watching how different machine learning models learn to mimic the decisions that humans make. I think the perspective that each of us have within our domain of expertise, also within our lives, within our regions, I think will come into a greater play in terms of how you advance in your career, how you sort of contribute to the economy, and different types of algorithms and robots will handle certain things for us in the future to some degree. And it mightn't be probably as much of that in the Caribbean when it comes to hardcore hardware coming there first. Naturally, it always kind of starts maybe in the US or the big centers and trickles down. But that's something interesting to keep an eye on. And once again, I kind of come back to, I like the perspective angle because before I met you at that conference, I'd known you for so many years. My dad had a computer company growing up. So from 10 years old, and you talk about plugging in things, and that's what I also saw computing as, not necessarily the programming aspect and building games or building just programs and building infrastructure on top of this hardware. And now that as I've gotten older and, you try to go make money and all this kind of stuff, you respect that particular beginning of computing. And that was the big thing back then. But now computing is sort of democratized. And how can we now up level our own skill to a world level on the software level, machine learning level, etc. So that was cool. So in the first part of the show, we try to dive into your career journey. So you mentioned at this point, you are leading developer advocacy at Stripe. And
I'm not leading it.
Well, you're not leading it, but
we're working on it.
Cool. I didn't want to get in trouble. Yeah,
I don't want to get in trouble. I just got here.
Cool. So just reference. Okay. Yeah. But he's at Stripe doing developer advocacy. Also, if you want a job, reach out to him as well. And So you kind of told us where you grew up. You grew up in Antigua.
Yeah.
Kind of give us an understanding of why you chose computing. Like, did someone introduce you to it? Did you always have that affinity? And the main reason I asked that question is twofold. One, for folks that know exactly what they want to do, you seem like that type of person to some degree.
Yeah.
And, what's the perspective for others who may not know what they kind of want to do?
Yeah. So kind of going back to me being in high school at home, because I think just before I was like starting to apply for colleges, this is when I'm like the year before is when I'm trying to figure out, well, what exactly am I supposed to be doing? Like, what's the, like, what's the point? Like, what are we doing here? And for a long time, I was really interested in studying people and understanding like how they work. When I say that, like from a psychological perspective, like I want to do psychology. I wanted to do behavioral psychology and kind of understand, like from an emotional perspective, like why do people behave the way that they do, understanding habits and traits and like all these types of like that type of stuff was always very interesting for me. And it still is to this day, but like I wanted to do that as a profession. Now, again, like we're talking about like Antigua in the 90s, right? You couldn't, as a Caribbean child, say you wanted to do psychology because the first thing that your parents tell you is that you're going to go work in a crazy house, right?
Yeah.
And that no self-respecting person wants to go work in the crazy house. You could be the crazy doctor and, people could be saying all kind of things about you. And my father said, yo, we're not doing that.
Yep.
So then that was the end of that conversation. So I was like, man, well, I had to figure something else out. Like, what else am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you remember, I told you I didn't grow up with computers, right? Like I went to high school, the year I left high school, at home, secondary school, that's the year that they brought in a computer lab. It's just like I walk in on the fifth form and all of a sudden these computers appear, right? But luckily, so my father used to have to write reports and all these types of things. So I grew up with him being on a typewriter for many, many years. And then eventually he was like, yeah, I need to get a computer because this typewriter thing,
Yeah, they were.
we had to do something different. So, and that's when you bought computers back then, like it came with everything. You're like, no, you buy a computer, it just come with like the tower and it don't come with the rest of it. Like those days when you say I buy a computer, it come with the monitor, the keyboard, the mouse, the printer come with it. It
mouse pad.
Yeah, it come with everything. Like you just have to open the box and plug it in, right? You don't have to buy a piece of this and piece of that. So anyway, he bought a computer. It was a Compact Presario. I don't know if y'all remember compacts, but this is how old it was. Compact Presario. And that was his report machine. You know what I mean? So when I say that, I mean, I couldn't touch it. I couldn't eat by the table. You know what I mean? Like the children cannot touch the machine. This is like a serious big people thing. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
Can't touch it. Mm-hmm. And so when he'd go to bed, like I'd wake up and I'd be on the computer, right? And I was, and what we doing, right? We're playing solitaire and Minesweeper, and that's what we're doing, right? And so eventually it got to the point, like after a couple of years, that I got better at the computer than he did.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because eventually, like once the novelty of the new thing wears off, then you start, your parents start to ease up a little bit.
Yes.
And so I started to play like video games and stuff. Like I think like this is when video games was on a CD. You put in the CD, install it. Mm-hmm. You had to go to like the DOS prompt and type install. You know what I mean? To install the game and stuff like that. So I was playing this game, and I can't remember, something happened, and then I ended up having to fix it. And so I ended up like navigating through the C drive and clicking all kind of stuff because I'm just trying to figure this out, right? I'm like, if this guy can come in and plug in things, and I've been watching this guy come and plug in cables for years now, I must be able to do this because I watch him do this enough. And so anyway, at one point now, I decided to pick up one of the books because again, you buy the computer come with a bunch of books.
Right. And
as I'm kind of navigating through the books, trying to figure out how to fix this thing, I found a book about the internet, right? And it was Netscape Navigator and HTML. Mm-hmm. So I wrote my first lines of HTML one summer, and it was, if you think about it today, it's very trivial, right? I literally just put my name in the middle of the screen. That was all it was. But at the time, again, we're talking 97, 98, whatever it was.
Damn.
At the time, I was like, yo, this is magic. You know what I mean? So I call my partners on the phone, like, yo, you need to come to the house. Yeah, I just put my name on the computer. I was like, yo, if you come over, I can put your name on the computer too. Watch it, bad, right? Because I'm excited. You know what I mean? Like it's like you learn a new thing and you're excited about it. You know, and I can imagine that's a similar way how people that are learning today feel, right? Like if they like you unlocked an achievement and you're excited, you want to share it with people.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
So anyway, at that point, I was like, well, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? Like I want to dive into that feeling of achievements, like unlocking achievements through this machine and trying to figure that out. But again, at the time, you know, the examples that I saw around me weren't around programming, but they're around like fixing things, you know what I mean? And so my head was like, oh, I'm going to come and learn how to fix things. And so even though I decided, hey, I want to do computer science as like when I'm studying in university, I still didn't know what I was going to do, right?
Okay.
Because I mean, I assume at some point, like I have to do more than just plug in cables. So, but and I didn't know. I didn't have perspective. I didn't know anything else.
Right.
You know, and again, it's only after coming to Florida and going to Florida Tech where I was like, oh, okay, I can do all these other things. Like this is interesting. And then now I kind of started to, you know, go into career fairs and, you know, I was in the ACM, I'm sorry, Association for Computing Machines.
Yes.
And I was in like IEEE and NSBE and, you know, all them kind of things.
And then the Caribbean Students Association group too.
Yeah, Caribbean Association. Yeah, but again, all that was really just about perspective at the end of the day.
I see.
Like at the time, I didn't see that, but like now as an older person, like I could look back in time and be like, you know, that's really what I was looking for. I was looking for perspective. Like I was trying to understand the world that I was trying to break into and understand like what's possible. And so again, I think it was that moment when I put my name on the screen in Antigua the first time, and then coming to Florida Tech and understanding some of what's possible for me was just like, okay, well, this is it. Like, this is what we're doing. You know what I mean? And then that kind of just kind of propelled me forward from that point.
Great. And tell us about, I think at least for those that are listening at home, probably choosing a school, and for those in the audience who already went to school and you know, you're working and all that, you know, bear with us. But I think it's important to highlight maybe why you went to a smaller school versus a bigger school. And how was your sort of mindset when you entered Florida Tech as a smaller school? And at least from my perspective, I've always had in my head how people brand themselves. I've always kind of watched how people do that in the marketplace. In addition, you know, when you come from a Harvard and a Yale, the progression of different brands like that versus people from a smaller school or from a smaller region. So tell us some thoughts around that.
Sure. So I would tell you, so like being in Antigua, I think it's different, or just any island in the Caribbean at the time. It was different when you're looking for schools because I never went on a school tour. You know, some people just go on tours and you know, you
never went to school.
You travel and you know, oh, let me go into this open house and that open house. I never had none of that, right? Okay. What happened one year? My uncle, because my uncle travels a lot for work. He traveled a lot for work at the time, and so on one of his trips back home, he brought me this thick book, and it was like U.S. colleges and universities. You might remember that book. The book was like thousands of pages thick. Right. It talked about different schools. It talked about things to do in the area. It broke down the individual programs. GPA requirements, SAT deadlines, like whatever information. It was in a book, right? This like we didn't go on the internet just to look for this stuff, right? It was a big, thick book. And so I in the book now, and I'm thinking, well, I mean, I've been to the United States to visit people, you know, like a week or two, but I've never lived there. You know what I mean? And, you know, my perspective of college in the United States was like BET at MTV on TV. You know what I mean? Again, just being honest, like perspective, right? Like that's all I know. And so this is what what I think the world looks like from a college perspective. And so I was like, well, I don't really know this place. So I'm going to pick cities and states that I have family that lives at least close by.
Okay, right? Makes sense.
So I picked Florida because, you know, I have some family at the time that was scattered throughout Florida, Virginia, and then I think I picked New York. And I specifically now, after I picked those 3 states, I'm starting to look at good computer science schools in those states, right? So obviously Florida Tech was a good one. I applied to Florida Tech. I applied to UCF. I applied to Virginia Tech, and a couple other ones I can't remember. But anyway, I got into Florida Tech. I got into Virginia Tech. And so now it was, okay, am I going to go to Florida or am I going to go to Virginia, right?
Yeah.
I think at the time, either one of them would have been a good choice. You know, back then and even now, I think either one of them were pretty good choices for like the path I wanted to take. What was important for me at Florida Tech and the deciding factor was, one, Florida was closer to home. So in case I didn't like it and I was ready to bounce, you know what I mean? Again, in my head, you know, it wasn't a big deal. Like I could do that. You know, now in retrospect, like plane travel is not that serious. But again, at the time, like, yeah, I'm not trying to, you know, be standing on no plane for too long. I just want to, you know, when I'm ready to go, I want to go. Right. And then also to the fact that Florida Tech specifically had the highest international student population at the time. I don't know what it is today, but like at the time, I think they were at like 11% international students, which is like a big number for the United States. So I'm like, okay, cool. I want to go there because I don't want to be like the only outsider, right? And then I think after a while, my mother had mentioned she knew some other Antiguans that were there. They were years ahead of me, but like, you know, she knew other people that were there. So I'm like, okay, well that sounds like a comfortable space for me to go to. So that's how I ended up doing that. So it wasn't about how big the school was or anything like that. But for me, it was really about where could I go and I was going to feel comfortable.
And you had that support system around you to.
Yeah, having a support system. Obviously, you know, from the beginning, I applied to schools that had good reputations in computer science, right? So like that was already sorted out. But like now, in terms of making the choice, it was, well, which one of these places am I going to be the most comfortable studying at?
That makes sense.
And then so I ended up at Florida Tech. And again, like you mentioned before, like, so I ended up joining the Caribbean Students Association and again, seeking places that would make me comfortable. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't feel as much of an outsider. And I think that was important too, because, you know, one of the things I always tell people is like, you have to be comfortable. And then when you're comfort breeds confidence. You know what I mean? Okay. If you're not comfortable, you're not going to be confident. And if I'm not confident, I'm not going to do my best work. You know what I mean? Like you need confidence to do your job, right? If your job as a student, you know what I mean? You need to be comfortable and be confident that, hey, I'm going to be able to walk into this test with confidence. I'm going to be able to do this presentation with confidence. I'm going to be able to write my thesis or whatever with confidence, right?
Yes.
And that confidence not only just comes from academic excellence, it also comes from like the environment that you're in. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the relationships you have with people, you know, you playing football, we playing basketball, or, you know what I mean? Like you have to find balance in life.
You're a whole person, essentially, not just a particular task. You
have to find balance in life, right? And so all of those things are things you should think about, like as you're not only as you're applying to go to a place, but then choosing how am I going to behave when I'm here, right? Because I've spoken to other folks that have done alternative strategies where they've kind of come in and they've been like, oh, I'm not talking to nobody. I can just go to my room and study and whatever. Yeah. And a lot of the times now they look back at those moments with regret. Because when you think about it, right, like not only do you have to be, again, as a professional, not only do you have to be technically or just from a knowledge perspective, sharp and ready to go, but then, you know, a lot of the things that we do, a lot of opportunities that we get are because of people that we know.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So let's look at this conversation that me and you are having right here on this moment. If I didn't know you and you didn't know me, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And if we didn't know each other, right, then you'd have been like, oh, okay, well, how am I going to, like, who am I going to have as a guest on my show? Or who am I going to do this? Like, you're gonna try and fill these holes with other things versus being like, oh, yeah, I can just go ask my friends. Like my friends will support me in the things that I'm doing, You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like even when I started speaking, when I started public speaking, it was people that I knew that were like, oh, hey, well, you should do this.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like you should do this thing. You know what I mean? Or every job that I've gotten is because of somebody that I knew. Every single one. You know what I mean? I have never gotten a job from a recruiter. I've spoken to a lot of recruiters and they've given me a lot of interviews.
Yes.
A recruiter has never gotten me a job. So that's a different thing to talk about. I've gotten interviews. They've never gotten me a job. Every job that I've gotten, I could point to a person that I've known before the fact that has been like, oh, Cecil can do this. Yes. Cecil can do that. Right. And so again, going back to my original point, you know what I mean? It's not only just okay for you to be academically and technically sound, you know what I mean? But again, you have to be a balanced individual, right? Like you got to be able to have conversations with people like a regular person. You know what I mean? You have to be able to navigate the world. And sometimes like shut off that part of your brain that is like deeply logical, you know what I mean? And then just kind of like experience life to understand, again, perspective, right? And this perspective of other people and see how you can kind of tie those two things together.
Great. And so one of the things I wanted to re-highlight in what you just shared there is, if we didn't know each other, and to some degree we knew each other by, just being from the Caribbean, Cecil from the Caribbean, cool. Yeah. And I always kept that in my head. However, I think only until I met you at the conference after you graduated and you're like, hey, you could kind of talk to people and do technical stuff. You should consider this particular position. And you kind of blew my mind when I was like, oh, I travel to conferences, write code, talk to people. Yeah. And you giving me that perspective got my mind going about, hey, maybe my strength is not necessarily only sitting down coding in a room as a data scientist, but more so reaching out to people and connecting people and discussing different things. And I'm leaning a lot more into that over time. However, I always remember, like my advisor would just tell me, hey, remember the managers get fired first and the non-technical people tend to get fired first. Yeah. So I think that kind of runs in my head at the same time. But thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a balance thing, right? It's like everyone can't do everything. You know what I mean? Yes. And so everyone can't be on stage or on the microphone or whatever the case is, right? But if you can, you almost owe it to yourself and then the people around you for you to exercise that muscle.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? I can tell you my first day standing on stage on a conference, I was terrified. You know what I mean? I'm just like, yeah, why these people put me on this stage? All these people, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to do this. But then you do it. And then it's what happens after that brings value to you, right? So the value to everybody is you being on stage and sharing information. The value to yourself is what happens after the fact. And after the fact is people coming up to you and either offering you opportunities, you know what I'm saying? Like sharing their stories and just, again, letting you know about, how much you helped them, how much, you changed their life and all these types of things, right? And all of that kind of goes into your head in a very emotional way. So this is where the psychology part comes in, right? Because I'm still very into the psychology of it. After you're done, like you get, they like to call it the speaker high. The speaker high hits you because of the energy you get from everybody else. And then now, you look at that and you're just like, okay, well, in that moment, you can decide, well, is this something that I could do or not? You know what I mean? And when you make that choice, and I say this to all of us as Caribbean people, you know what I mean? You are now the leader, right? Yes. Like whether you ask for it or not, you are by default the leader because you are on stage or on the microphone, like we're talking right now, you know what I mean? And everyone else is kind of sitting back, drinking the water or the coffee or whatever. And they're like consuming everything that we're saying. And so by default now, we're forcing people emotionally to think about what we're saying.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so now, if you always keep that in the back of your head, you have to think about, well, if I have this power, quote unquote, the superpower, how can I use that in a positive way to like I don't want to use power again, but like to influence people in a good way.
Yes.
Right. Like how can I, like you doing this podcast, right? Like you are a leader, right? You might not have asked for it, but you have a whole show with, I'm looking at your YouTube. You have tons of episodes here. You are a leader. Like you have accepted that role, whether you ask for it or not.
Yes.
And now your job is to speak to people, to share stories, and to let folks know, well, this is what's possible, right? Like you're giving perspective.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like people aren't seeking it themselves. They come to your show so you could give it to them. And I think, again, that's one of the things that as Caribbean people, we need to do, right? We need to seek out our leaders. We need to develop new leaders, and our leaders need to accept the job. You know what I mean? Like it has to come. It has to come. It has to come from both sides, right? Like we have to seek them out, and then they have to accept it. Which is why I'm saying again. So going back now, you think about advocacy. You think about choosing the roles you go into and choosing everything. It all comes back down to, what am I really trying to do here?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, and is it for me or is it for everyone else? Like one of the things I like to say, and this might sound like a roundabout story, but at the end of it, what I always like to tell people is, computers are dumb machines. Like computers are like the dumbest things in the world. And they're dumb because their sole job is to follow orders.
Yes.
Right? They don't, as much as we talk about AI and the Terminator and the Matrix and whatever, computers only do what we tell them to do. Right? So then that means that the true inspiration and the guidance comes from us. That means like the leadership comes from us. Right? And so as we kind of look at advancing our future and empowering each other, as much as we say, oh man, these computers are hard and complicated and whatever. And I'm like, not really. Like they're pretty stupid machines. You know what I'm saying? Like if I don't type a line of code, like it doesn't do anything. It just sits there and just sucks power out of the wall. It literally does nothing. Right. And so now, again, we have to, from a very psychological perspective, we have to accept that role of leadership and try and figure out, if we are the leaders, both of ourselves and of this digital world that we're creating, what do we want to do with that power?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like what's the point? And I think what I'm saying is going to make so much more sense when you see things like the metaverse happen. And we, and I don't know that it may or may not happen. I know people have tried that a few times before in the past, but assuming that it happens the way that some of these larger companies are thinking about it, you know what I mean? We have to think about, as we walk into that space, like what does government look like in the metaverse?
In the metaverse.
What does e-commerce look like in the metaverse? What does the Caribbeans play in the metaverse in the future? Right? Like what are the opportunities that we have that we can jump on today that maybe we're not thinking about? And we're not thinking about it because we don't yet have the perspective.
And what are the geographical implications? So for instance, right now you travel in the real world, you're geographically bound. But in this other world, does your government still have control over you when I go to some metaverse in China or in Russia or something like that? That was an interesting point. I wanted to get more into your psychology a little bit and the connections in terms of your career journey. So tell us what you were like in college, and the reason why I'm looking at that is I'm looking at your LinkedIn, seeing the jumps that you've made, and as we get closer to talking about how you got to Microsoft through all of the connections that you made, how did you sort of change in your attitude, approach to work as a software engineer, and as you groomed yourself to become a developer advocate? So guide us there.
Yeah, like I said, I think everything is about the balance that you take like throughout your entire life that kind of helps shape you to how you are. When I was in Antigua, I was very, like, I wasn't a talkative person.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
What? You weren't a talkative person?
I wasn't a talkative person. I wasn't into sports as much. Like I was a fat kid. You know what I mean? I was a kid that like didn't get picked to play cricket and, all them kind of things, right? Like, but what ended up happening, and this is a long story, but the story has a point. What ended up happening is that I ended up sitting on the side with the girls, right?
Okay.
And so, what ended up happening, I think I became very comfortable just talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
But, conversations with your female friends and conversations with your male friends are very different.
Fundamentally different.
Not from a sexual perspective, but they're just different. Like the types of conversation you have are just not the same. That's just what it is. And I think a part of that was important for me to be able to do, because now I saw the world again, like just very differently, right? Again, perspective, right? Everything goes back to perspective. And as I kind of saw how they were and how my guy friends were, because now I'm comparing relationships, right?
Okay.
Even when I was that young, I'm comparing like how things are different between those two sets of people. And this is something I do to this day. Like I like to compare things and understand like why they are the way that they are. When I went into college now, like I chose to be very different. You know what I mean? Because I looked at myself in primary school as being like, I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Like I have a lot and I'm comfortable. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have, a lot of family problems and those types of things. Like I had both parents and like I was fine.
Yes.
But like kind of going into college, I felt like I needed to be different if I was going to like succeed. So which is why, when I got in, like I intentionally forced myself to get involved with a lot of these different clubs and organizations and things of that nature. I can tell you, I was a way better student in college than I was when I did CXCs and, all them kind of things. You know what I mean? Because, I was at a point that I didn't really care. I was like, it's whatever. You know what I mean? But then you realize, again, like as you transition through different aspects of your life, like you gotta figure it out, or else you're gonna be in trouble. And so, like I went through a phase where I had to just be different, right? Like I had to immerse myself with people. And again, like I said, I always was interested in the way that people behaved. And so I think what better way than just to
immerse yourself and
be a part of the process, right? Like, instead of being an observer, you know what I mean? Let's be a participant. You know what I mean? So you know what? I started playing basketball. We played flag football. I was swimming more. I was doing all the things that I really didn't get to do when I was in primary school. You know what I mean? And even high school when I was in Antigua. The reason why that's important is because now I felt like I was starting to like defy what the stereotypical vision of a computer science person is, or what an engineer is, right? So when I graduated twice, like my friends are just like, dude, like you have a computer science degree? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah. Like, you do computer science? I'm like, yeah. Like, what happened? What's the big scene? They're like, you don't look like a computer scientist person. Like you know what I mean? Like I just be throwing parties and going out and you know what I mean? You be going carnival and all kind of thing. And they're like, that's not how computer people behave.
Exactly. Yeah.
But again, it was like, I had two goals, right? Like I had to psychologically be more interactive. Like I needed to be a different person, or I needed to grow into like a self-sufficient person. You know what I mean? And then two, like I needed to succeed in my job or my work, right? My job at the time being a student. And so I was doing like two things at the same time. In the back of my head, psychologically, I had two things that I was trying to do. You know what I mean? I was trying not to be like that scared, self-doubting child that I was in at home. And then two, I was trying to see, well, how far can I take this computer thing, right? Like what can I do with this? Again, perspective. I think the difference now, going from college now to like being a working professional. Now, in this stage of my life, what I do is like, because I like to analyze like just behavior. Like I look back at all of the things that I've done throughout my life, and I'm like, I think, there are good and bad aspects of it throughout the whole process. And I'm going through and I'm picking the pieces of me that I want to hold on to. You know what I mean? It's like, again, it's like you're constantly evolving your mental state, you know what I mean? To shape who you are. And, people like to say the things like you are who you are. Like I'm very much of the opinion of you are the sum of what you choose to be, which is a little bit different way to think about it. And I choose to like pick the good things or like the lessons you've learned or the experiences that you've had and hold on to those. Again, so why is this important? Like the same way that I choose to navigate like my personal life is the same way I choose to navigate my professional life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so when people ask me things like, how do I get better at this or that, or whatever the case is, I'm like, life is very simple, right? Because we already have the blueprint. You already know what to do. The thing is, you just have to decide whether you want to do it or not, right? So, you know, you think about like the relationships you have with the people that you care about, right? If you care about people, whoever these people are, you will make time to spend with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very simple concept.
Right.
You care about your parents, you will make time to see your parents or call them on the phone or whatever the case is. You care about your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. You're going to make time to spend with these people, right? Because you want to put in the effort to make sure that that is successful. You know what I mean? Let's flip it now. Let's say we're talking about data science or computer science, or I don't know, maybe you want to do botany, or maybe you want to be a writer, right? How do I become better at my profession? Well, you have to spend the time to do it, right? And not only just in the beginning, but you always have to do it, right? Like if you're someone's child, you always have to spend time with, again, if you want that relationship to flourish, you always have to spend time with your parents or your siblings or whatever the case is. It's not like I'm going to do it now. Yeah, I'm not going to do it now and forget about it. And then the next 10 years, like I don't need to do it anymore and expect the relationship to be the same. Just like in your profession as well. Like I like to tell people too, another analogy I like to use. If you look at athletes, right? You know, any professional athlete that is good at what they do, practice every day, right? They spend time to do the thing that they care about, right? Mm-hmm. Anyone that's a good writer, you're a good poet, maybe you make movies, whatever it is, you do something, right? You're going to make time to do it, regardless of whether you're being paid for it or not, right? You're going to practice, you're going to read, study, whatever the case is, right? Again, you're going to spend the time to do the things that you care about, right? Psychologically, it is what it is.
Yes.
So now when we look at it from now a technical perspective, us as engineers and people that are, you know, either established in the field or people that are getting into the field or people that are just curious and want to understand, if you want to be good at it, if you want to understand it and learn about it, you have to spend time doing it. So if anyone that comes and asks me, hey, how do I become good at something? I'm like, you just have to do it. You know what I mean? And obviously, like it goes deeper than that, but like fundamentally, you have to want to do it. You know, a lot of times we say we want to do things, but we really don't. You know what I mean? Yes. It's like I'll give you all a real story. Like, so I was dating this girl a couple of years ago, and she's like, oh man, like you work from home. Like I want to have a job like you. You know what I mean? But like what she's seeing is like years of work allowing me to sit in this room and stay home and have conversations with people. You know what I mean? Like she didn't see me up on Saturday at 2:00 in the morning, being on call, deploying software and doing this and doing that. Right. Like, you know what I mean? She didn't see all of that. Right. So I'm like, yo, I'm like, if you want to get here, like you got 10 years.
Yep.
You know what I mean? If you want to do what I do and be in the position that I'm in, you got 10 years. Right. And again, that's not to deter or to scare anybody, but the fact of the matter is like, you have to put in the effort.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like we can't just see, like I can't just look at you and be like, yo, Mark, all them books, boy, you got nice headphones and you know what I mean? The man, you know, clean up and thing, you know what I mean? I want to go do what Mark do. But you don't know that, like this guy has a PhD. You see what I'm saying? Like you don't know that he's put in the time and the effort to be and sit in the position that he's in today, right?
Yes.
And you did that because you care about it. It's something you care about, something you believe in, something that somewhere in the back of your brain or in your soul, you're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? Versus being like, oh man, I see Cecil over there. Yeah, let me try that and see what happens. You know what I mean? Like that's not the same thing. And so again, going back to it, like for me, everything in life is very fundamental. Like, again, we have the blueprint. We know how this works. You know what I mean? You got to find the thing that you really care about, right? And if you care about it, you will figure it out.
Yes.
At some point.
That's a good one. Yeah, and I think you mentioning this notion of figuring something out, and as you've hopped different companies and you ended up in Microsoft, senior developer advocate, and a lot of people know you because you created a brand with them. When you had kind of started out, I imagine you didn't necessarily think that you'd get, I don't want to say you didn't think that you would get there. You didn't obviously know how it may evolve over time. But how did you meet the people that gave you those opportunities? And what were one or two criteria that you decided, all right, you know what, it's time for me to leave? And when you entered a job, were there things that you decided, all right, I need to learn X, Y, and Z before I either decide I'm going to leave or try something different? So share some of that with us.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I'll give you a little bit of the pre and during Microsoft conversation so you can kind of understand the bigger part of the picture. So at the time, like, so I was doing code camps. So like these little smaller conferences, maybe like 1,000 people, whatever, giving talks about, I think at the time I was doing like web APIs and, web applications and those types of things.
That's like the one in Orlando where we met.
Yeah. Like the one in Orlando when me and you had caught up a couple of years ago. And so obviously through that, like when you do enough of those things, right? And again, for folks that don't know, like you don't get paid to do this, right? Like you rent your own hotel, you drive your own car or buy your own plane ticket and you go to this place to speak. Like they don't pay for you.
Yep.
And so this was just a thing that I was doing because I liked doing it, right? Like I cared about it. So I put effort into doing it for my own reasons. And, it's through that, like I met tons of folks, right? Like, when you're in Florida and you're going to, you're on the conference circuit, so to speak, eventually you're going to start seeing the same people. Okay. You know what I mean? You're going to start seeing like-minded people that care about the same thing that you care about. So obviously, like you started to develop relationships and reputations and things of that nature. And I was on social media one day and my buddy Shane, so Shane lives in Orlando, and Shane had posted a message, hey, we're starting this new team. If you're interested in joining, let me know. And so at the time I was just like, let me message him and see what happened. Right. Like I didn't, I wasn't thinking too hard about it. Acid wasn't even job hunting, but I was like, let me see what happened. Microsoft job. Right. So I messaged him, Derek, DM'd him on Twitter and he's like, hold on, let me have you talk to somebody. And I think that same afternoon, I spent maybe about an hour DMing this dude. I didn't know who he was. Like he was one of the managers at the time. Spent about an hour DMing the dude, sent him my resume. And like 2 weeks later, I'm in Seattle.
Okay.
And that was it. Like it was quick. It was short. And that was it. Again, I tell that story because, and that's the short version, but I tell that story because it is through my relationship with Shane and through him and us having like that similar mindset and a similar work ethic where I'm like, my friend or my colleague was just like, Cecil could do this. Let me introduce you to this person. Right. And then, so now I have the job. So now you have the job and I'm in a new place. One of the things I could tell that was very intimidating for me at that time. So us joining the team was very new, right? The team might've been like 2 months old when I joined. So this is a brand new, fresh thing, right? And I'm sitting in the room. We had like one of the meetings where they fly everybody in and we all sitting in the room together. And I'm looking around the room and I'm like, I'm seeing people, this person used to work in Amazon. This person worked at Twitter. This person worked at Netflix and NVIDIA and all these big companies. And I'm just like, I just came from Florida. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have these big technical chops in my head anyway. That's what I'm thinking, right? I don't have like these big companies on my resume. You know what I mean? I don't know how am I supposed to be able to compare to the people that are in this room at that time. So I had like that moment of like, I guess, anxiety, right? I guess is how I would describe it. And, throughout that week, like I made a decision that week that I had to be like, at the end of the day, when this is all said and done, like I had to be the best person in this room. however you clarify best, right? Maybe not like technically best, because again, some of these folks have years of experience over me, but like nobody is going to outwork me. You know what I mean? And that was just in my head from the beginning. Like nobody in this room is going to be able to outwork me. Like it's just not going to happen. And one of the things I did too, right? So now we're in the room and you're meeting your teammates and all this types of stuff. The first thing I'm like, just like I did at Florida Tech, let me go and see who are the groups of people that I need to like connect with outside of my bubble.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Let me look at these different teams and departments and things of that nature. Let me understand what their needs are, what their problem areas are, and see what can I do in my position to help them. The reason why that's important is because now, again, you're at a new company and you have zero clout. These people don't know you from Adam. You know what I mean? Like they don't owe you nothing. I remember in the beginning, people never used to answer my emails or none of that type of stuff. Well, because you're the new person, right? And so
okay.
You think about if you have 200 emails, right? And one of your emails comes from somebody that you have no idea who he is or what he's doing. And then you have emails from all of your other colleagues. Like, which ones are you going to answer first?
Fair enough.
I mean, that's fair. And I didn't take it as a disrespectful way. That's the way the world functions, right? I mean, you're going to put the people that you care about as priority, right? You know what I mean? So now my goal is, okay, well, I need to establish my presence in this company. You know what I mean? Like, however that happens. But in my head, like that's what it is. And again, another thing too, and this also came from Florida Tech. Like I'm very low key competitive. You know what I mean? Like I'm not aggressively competitive. Like I'm not gonna come and like start cuss you out and thing. But if I see Mark just did this, I'm like, I gotta top that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like Mark just wrote this really good article, research paper, whatever. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, I need to write two. You know what I mean? Like in the back of my head, that's always how I've been. Again, because nobody's supposed to outwork me. Like you can't do it. It's not gonna happen.
All right. Okay, game on now. Game on.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. And so for me, I find more, and again, it's in a friendly way. Like there's no animosity or there's no negative energy towards anybody. But that's just where I find self-motivation. Yes. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like you show me the limits and then I try and break the ceiling. You see what I'm saying? And then that's just kind of how I look at it. And so now my teammates are people at the time that were coming from all these different companies, right? So they had information that I didn't know, right? And so once I started to soak up their information, like I'm like, I have to break the ceiling. Like I have to push past whatever it is that they're doing, right? And then, so eventually after, again, I spent 4 years on the team, 4.5 years, that just became normal for me. You know what I mean? Until I got to the point that I was just like, okay, I feel comfortable saying, I'm trying not to sound too cocky on this. Sure. I got comfortable to the point that I'm saying like, I am one of the best people in this room.
Okay.
Without question. And I don't doubt it at all. And it's to the point too, where people on the outside, when I say the outside, like internally outside, like in different teams within the company, was like, this dude really knows what he's doing. Like he knows what he's talking about. I should answer his email when he sends me an email. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Not only I should answer his email, like I should reach out to him directly and ask him things. Yes. You know what I mean? Because now this is a trusted resource. This is a trusted ally that I have in, us unlocking, the solutions to whatever problem it is that we're trying to solve. But again, that's something that takes years to do. And it takes consistency, right? Like you can't, you're not going to join a job today and in 6 months be like, all right, cool. Like I have asserted dominance over all I see, right? Yes. It's going to be one of those, hey, this is something that I have to commit to, right? So again, going back to the psychology of like, do you care about this or not? You know what I mean? Like I care about being the best.
That's kind of what
I care about it. So because I care about it, I'm going to put in the time and effort to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of times people are like, Cecil, it's Saturday. Why are you, why are you recording videos and podcasts? Why are you, creating content? Why are you doing this thing? I'm just like, what else am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like while you're sleeping, I'm working.
One of the things that I want to highlight, actually, a couple of things that you said in there, and I think this is kind of like my first experience in a bigger, like well-established tech company. So my jobs, I worked in a railroad company. Okay, it's a big company, but it's a railroad company. Really, very different pace of innovation, or just working. Then I worked in a startup, so about 200 and something people. So you got to much easier discover who are the players in the company and what you can do, as you're saying, to earn a reputation with them such that you can get different things done across the business. And I guess it's nice to see that as you entered Microsoft, there was this clear notion of, okay, this is my bubble. Microsoft is this ginormous thing. And you start expanding out, driven by, hey, I need to be the best in this room, to that's just your credo. And from there, you establish your reputation to some degree Microsoft wide, which I think is quite cool. In addition to the position that you were in, you're in the public marketplace. Tons of people outside of Microsoft know you that can also help whisper back inside, hey, this is the guy for the job, or girl, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. Those are things you don't learn in school. Study your classes, you get a job, and everything will be okay. Whereas I think what I'm enjoying about you highlighting is you becoming really good technically has a big fundamental component of the people that you end up interacting with along the way, it seems like. And any thoughts there?
Yeah, like going back to like those long stories I was telling in the beginning about how I psychologically approached being a different person going into college, and then after college, like looking back and like picking up those components that make sense. It has a lot to do with that, right? Like, again, about becoming like a whole person and not just like a book smart academic. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of look at it from, what are really the components to success? You know what I mean? Like, are the smartest people in the world the most successful people in the world? You know what I mean? Like, I'd argue most of the folks that, at least that I see examples of, college dropouts, you know what I mean? People that didn't graduate high school, but people that had the confidence to like make a bet on themselves.
Yep.
Right. And make a bet on, I have these resources. Like, how can I best use them to create something different and special? And again, like, I want to break the ceiling. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the times that we get very used to like whatever culture. And when I talk about culture, right, not just like Caribbean culture, but culture is the thing that defines behavior, right? And so when you think about it from that way, what are the things that we've just kind of accepted as default and never really challenge?
Yes.
And now, like, should I challenge it? Can I challenge it? Like how do we pick the right things to challenge? Or how do I decide I'm just going to sit back and take it, right? And I'm just going to accept it for what it is. And, it's the people that really challenge culture, the people that move it forward, right? Again, so we think about technology, like you think about your phone, right? Like we don't talk about this, but your cell phone, your smartphone has changed culture.
Yes.
It changes how we communicate with each other. It changes how we share information with each other. It changes how we are productive day to day. So by right, it has changed culture, right?
Yes.
It has changed the way that we listen to music. It has changed the way that we travel. It has changed the way that we write things down or whatever. It has changed culture. Everyone's culture, not just Caribbean people. Like, everyone's culture is different. And so now it's the people that were able to kind of see that and say, okay, well, I'm going to push past what's normal and like we're going to do something different and new. You know what I mean? And so that's the kind of way that I like to look at things, right? Like, I'm going to pick and choose what I'm comfortable pushing on and not pushing on, right?
Yep.
Because again, everyone's different, right? Like I can say whatever I want to say on the show because I've done it.
Yes.
But then, because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You got to figure out in you becoming like a whole person, you know what I mean? And not just like an academic or otherwise. what are the things that you're comfortable doing and being a part of? What are the things that you care about that you're going to put time into, right? And focus on that. And then again, like that's where success comes from, right? Like it's what's that term? When preparation meets opportunity, right? Like that's success. So there's some term that goes like that.
So I want to tell a quick story, at least the experience that I had. And as I'm listening to a lot of the psychology tidbits that you're sharing, or the psychology frameworks that you're sharing, when I met you at the conference, so a big part of my success has been volunteering for conferences, completely for free, doing a ton of work, not expecting anything in return, but ultimately just trying to provide value in return for just having an opportunity to do something.
Yeah.
And so a friend of mine, I was working in his railroad company, he tells me about this code conference in Orlando. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. But I decided, all right, let me look into it. Then I see you. So one of the things I want people to walk away with is everyone that you meet is a node in your graph that you should always keep in mind. You might have a strong connection, a weak connection, but there is some level of connection, and you always need to keep that in mind. I was like, all right, I'm going to go. And I don't know if I may have reached out to you before I came to the conference. And
I think you told me you were coming.
Yes.
Yeah, you told me you're coming.
And I was like, okay, well, actually, you were the only reason I was going to the conference, because there's lots of other things there. I'm like, okay, but just for the experience as well. So we met, and you encouraged me to apply. And I went out to Microsoft, and my Microsoft interview story after my master's. I had an interview at Microsoft. I hate school, by the way, like just formal schooling. I don't learn in that environment very well, but you got to do it as an international student. So I get to Microsoft after my master's, have an interview. Another friend from FIT, he was on the interview panel. It was Dion. And he was like, hey, he didn't interview me, but he's like, hey, congrats, you're going to get an offer. So I feeling good.
Yeah.
I know everybody's going to get offers. Boom. I didn't get an offer. So everybody else got an offer when it shook out, and I didn't get one. So I went to do my PhD. And one of the guys that interviewed me at Microsoft told me, hey, don't worry. I failed my first interview at Microsoft, and I went off, did some work, came back 5 years later and succeeded. Circa, that interview that you got me was 5 years later. So I walked into that Microsoft interview like, hey, this is just as this guy kind of predicted, coming back to that notion of, hey, this thing took a lot of time to get to certain places, and really reminding people to, you can't rush it. You don't know when it's going to come. And when I got into the room, I was definitely nervous. I didn't think I had maybe as much of the deep learning experience, just because as a function of the job. And the other thing that I really took away from there was building your brand. And that was one of the pieces of feedback that I got, that, hey, you're trying to be a developer advocate. Nobody really knows you in the marketplace. What have you written? Yeah. How can we be confident that you can educate and convince people to adopt our platform? And since then, even though I didn't get into Microsoft, psychologically you feel defeated to some degree, but I was like, you can't give up. And now that I'm at NVIDIA, through connections just like yourself, I've taken, a much firmer stance on, hey, building your brand, be it whatever it is, especially as a technical person who can communicate with people, is super important. So can you share any advice on building your brand and as a developer advocate, let's say?
Yeah, I want to touch on one of the things you said there about feeling defeated. So I have a philosophy when it comes to dealing with those types of problems, right? And that's like in life, right? Again, whether it's a personal problem or a technical thing, there's two choices you have. You could fix it, or you could leave it alone. When you think about it, there's really nothing else you could do. I'm either going to
like a very binary person. Fix it or like that's.
Well, but think about it. I have a problem, right? I'm either going to try to fix it, and there might be multiple ways to fix it, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I'm either going to try to fix it, or I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to leave it alone. Either way, staying in the middle and choosing indecision is dangerous. Indecision is dangerous because it wastes time.
Yes.
And you lose clarity about what you're focusing on. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's like, okay, so I'm gonna use you again as an example. Like you have this show, right? You have this podcast, and you could sit in indecision and debate about doing a podcast for years. And people do that, right? I know people that have done that. And one point is like, oh, I'm afraid I don't know if it's going to be successful. But then two, I could be like, well, you've just sat for 2 years and you haven't done anything.
Yes.
So like your brain, you haven't like advanced, you haven't declined, but you haven't advanced either. You're just kind of, it's like you're just burning electricity. It's like, you know, you go into the bathroom, you turn on the faucet and you just have the water running. Like, what are we doing? You're going to use it or you're not going to use it? Like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, let's make a decision. And so again, like when I think about that thing of feeling defeated, what I like to tell people is you have two choices, right? And it's not about fix it or not fix it, but it's about, I could either take that feeling, right? Like that energy, that psychological energy, and I could direct it towards me in a positive way, or I could dwell on it and I can have it beat me down.
Yep.
Right. And so, you know, you kind of have to figure out, well, what do I want to do? And then, you know what? Sometimes you can do both. Sometimes you just need a minute to chill out.
Yes.
And then clear your head. But at the end of the day, you have to choose, am I going to commit? Do I care about this? And am I going to commit and try to figure it out? Or am I going to leave it alone and do something else? You know what I mean? Because again, any successful person is going to tell you like that their journey has been littered with failure, right? Because failing is a part of figuring it out. You know what I mean? The question is like, how badly do you want to figure it out? You know what I mean? Or
what's interesting is before my interview, so, and I think this is kind of interesting where music comes in. There's a song that I was playing right before I'm driving over to the interview. So I'm getting all pumped up and I'm like, you know what? F it. I don't care what's going to happen. I'm just going to walk in there as my best, and wherever I'm at right now, that's just the next level that I need to get to. And that's how I felt in the first Microsoft interview. And I had to go into this, in my opinion, a drudgery journey of a PhD, especially something that you don't want to do. I think that's an interesting highlight there. You know, you're motivated to do something, but there's this chasm that you have to cross to kind of get to where you want to go. So it's nice that you're kind of pointing out that notion of sort of doing something. And I kind of wanted to share, I'm even starting a different podcast. And that same thought process of, is this going to work? What am I going to do? Is coming up again, even though with this one, I was just like, you know what, let's just go. I presented it to like a group of people. I'm like, you know what, let's just get started, start interviewing and sort of see where it evolves from there. And I've kind of looked at you from afar as I've seen you brand yourself in the marketplace and other people that we know as well. So it's kind of, it's very interesting to think about in your professional career. And that's not, like I said, something you learn in school. Like, how do you brand yourself in this new world? So as we get closer to sort of finishing, you've shared a lot of advice. I'm taking my own personal notes. Yeah. And what two pieces of advice would you give to a high schooler, a college student, and a professional, given your understanding of tech globally, all the different perspectives that you've gotten, that they should keep with them in both the short term and long term as it comes to like their future in the Caribbean? Yeah, my advice would always be like, don't be afraid to experiment and explore. And I say that because that's one of the things that I would have told myself, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Right. Because again, like at that point, and, you know, prior to me going to college and whatnot, like I was very timid and I was very afraid of exploring, and I was very afraid of failing. Because, you know, like you fail at stuff as a child. And I feel like it hits you harder as a child than it does when you're older, because you're not like as mentally secure in your in your level of confidence. Yes. But I think I would tell anyone that's in high school or primary school or whatever the case, wherever you are in your career, it's really just about trying to explore and understand things, and just know that there's going to be a lot of things that break and don't work and don't fit the right way, or you just don't understand, or you're going to hear people use language and jargon that sound like a different language. You know what I mean? You're not going to know what it is. And
Honestly, like if it's something that you care about, like you're gonna stick with it and just have the discipline to figure it out. Like I keep saying throughout this conversation, if you care about something, like you're gonna make the time for it, and a part of that is having discipline.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? This is another conversation we can get into another day, but it is important for us to understand the importance of discipline. You know what I'm saying? Like I've never been in the army or the military or anything like that, but like I look at those things again from a psychological perspective and I study them sometimes.
Yes.
To be like, the mission is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether you are the best soldier or not, or whatever the case is, the fact is like we're on a team and we have a mission and I'm going to do my part to achieve that mission. Yes. Your team, like your army might be like your family or your coworkers or whatever the case is, right? And, everyone's not going to succeed. Everyone's not going to maybe not succeed at the same time or maybe not succeed at the same things, but collectively, we can come together. We could create something special. We could do something important.
I see.
And so the important part is like being able to have the discipline to understand like what's the bigger picture and then commit to what you're doing. Right? Like if you have a family, right? Again, your family is not the military, but if you have a family, like you need to have the discipline to commit to your family.
Right.
Because you wanted them, right? Like you wanted spouse, children, dog and white picket fence and all that stuff. Like if you want it, you have to be able to commit to do the work to have it, right? And we all know relationships are hard. And, if you don't put in the work, like it's not going to work out.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So again, like going back, I think people need to figure out an experiment, particularly younger folks, just experiment and try to understand, well, what do I want to do? And then after you see like a clear picture or a picture that's clearer than what you had before, because picture is never really clear, because pictures always change. Right. Again, from a psychological perspective, commit with the discipline to saying, I'm going to figure it out. And a part of that too is not even just saying like, I'm not saying figure it out by yourself either, right? Because I think that's an important thing to talk about. It's not about figuring it out by yourself. It's just about figuring it out, period. Whether that's going online or on your phone or asking somebody or even just talking to someone, listening to podcasts, reading books, watching documentaries, like whatever it is that you need to do, like seek knowledge from people that have it and have gone through it. And then now you paint your own picture based on like the collection of things that you've gotten from these different people.
Yes.
And so again, you do the exploration, you figure it out, you commit to it. And then now, and again, the important part, I think, particularly for us as Caribbean people, now we have to accept the role of leaders. You know what I mean? And then leaders doesn't mean that we're in control, but leaders just means that we're in a position to guide and to...
And you have a big responsibility.
Impart advice or just be able to share information to help you do better than I did. You know what I mean? Like that for me is what the leader is. Leader doesn't mean like I tell you what to do and you follow me. You know what I mean? Leader for me means that like I'm going to share the good and the bad things. And then you could look at that, take it in and try and figure out what makes sense for you. It's almost like a teacher, right? Like people like to say teachers don't teach, right? And that's an interesting thing that I didn't really understand, but now it kind of makes sense to me. Like teachers really don't, particularly as you get older, they don't really teach you, like they guide you to learn. You know what I mean? Like you really teach yourself, technically. And I mean, we can debate this. Everyone kind of looks at that differently, but that's the way I kind of have chosen to accept it. We have the name teacher because they tell you things, but like, again, it's a relationship where you have to receive the information, right? If you choose not to receive it, does that mean that I'm a bad teacher? You know what I mean? I
see what you're saying.
Like if I have 10 students and half of them receive the information and half of them don't, does that mean I'm a bad teacher? Maybe it could be. I'm not saying it doesn't, but does it? But
there are two sides though.
Can I speak in absolutes to say that this is the case? Or, maybe I need to change the way that I share the information, or maybe because it's a two-way relationship. Maybe you just don't want it, right? Think about when you were in school. I was in class a lot. A lot of the times I didn't want it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't want to be there.
I tell people I used to take electives because I had science credits. I took astrology or whatever. I didn't want it. I just wanted the credits. I don't care about astrology or astronomy, whatever the class is. So as a person's talking to me and I'm getting whatever grades I'm getting from that class, does that mean that that person is a bad teacher, or does that mean that I just didn't want it? You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So like those are important things for us to think about. As we, again, like, as you know, we have the discipline, we commit, we learn, and then now we're accepting that position of leadership. You know what I mean? We have to always just think about, again, it's a two-way relationship, right? And so psychologically, we have to figure out, well, what's the right path to success?
Great. And the last two questions I think I have is, but first, give me a moment here. Let me think about this properly. Let's start with what three books do you recommend? And I'll come back to the last question. For people to read, just in general. It could be technical. It could be things that I think have impacted you. It could be as an individual, technical career, whatever you think is good for people to digest.
Yeah. So again, I like to read books that are based on philosophy and psychology. Okay. Obviously, I read technical books because of the job, but again, are you
a big reader, by the way?
I go in phases. Like I read, and then I read more technical books sometimes, and then I just check out, and so it kind of comes and goes in waves.
Makes sense.
I'll tell you two of the books that I really liked, and then another one that I finished reading recently. So two books. One is called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. And
is that Maury?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was a cool book.
So The 5 People You Meet in Heaven was a really good book. Just really talking about like these journeys that this guy is kind of going through to understand, kind of just seek the meaning of life, I suppose, if you want to kind of look at it from that perspective. Another book that I'm a huge fan of is called The Alchemist. That's a pretty common book. A lot of folks have it on like their top books to read, but it's one of my favorite books to read as well. Life of Pi, if folks have ever read Life of Pi. I think they ended up making a movie out of it. I never saw the movie, but like the book was really good. Then most recently, actually just this morning, I bought the audiobook of Will Smith's Will. And I don't usually buy into the whole celebrity, movie star, autobiography book kind of thing. But I went through the audiobook, and it was very it's not what I thought it was going to be. It's a very psychological, therapeutic book. And I say that as someone who is a father, someone who is, has separated from his son's mother, someone who's transitioned through different careers, someone who lives in a place that he wasn't born in, you know what I mean? And then thinking about work and success and family. Obviously, I'm not an actor or anything of the sort, but then I relate to some of those stories because a lot of those are things that I think about. Am I being a good father, right? Like, am I doing the right things to provide for my family? Do I work too much? You know what I mean? Like psychologically, like as he's explaining these things and talking about the relationship with his parents and things of that nature, that particular book surprisingly hit a lot of nerves for me. Again, I just finished reading it, going through that audiobook this morning. So it's very top of mind as I'm thinking about it. And I think it's one of those that I'm probably going to read again. Because I like to read books more than once, right? Like Life of Pi and 5 People That Meet in Heaven. Like I've read those books multiple times because I always think the first pass is like the understanding of, this is what this is about. And then the second or third time for me is really like ingesting knowledge. You know what I mean?
And then mapping back to what you felt in your own life as well, right?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between understanding something and consuming it. You know what I mean? Like you consume music, right? Like, you listen to the radio, like we're consuming music. But one of the things I do, as an example, is like if I'm going through a moment in life, right? Because music for us means different things, and everyone has a different song that based on what might have happened at that point in time of your life, that song has a particular psychological hold on you.
Mm-hmm.
What I like to do is I put on a song and I'd have the song on repeat. Like people don't like to listen to music around me
Oh,
because
dude, I do that all the time.
I put music on repeat and I'd hear different things in the song every time I go through it again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I say that now because I treat books the same way, right? Like you read through it one time, but you read through it again and you're seeing mentally, or you're verbalizing things that you might not have noticed the first time you went through it.
Mm-hmm.
Because now like your mind is in a different state as you're kind of going through it again. And so again, these are some of the things I like to do in terms of like trying to understand something and then just like consuming it, right? Like it's very different. Yep. So anyway, I think those would be some good books for folks to check out. For people that are watching, I know you're going to put this on YouTube. I'd love to see folks in the comments put down some of the books and things that they're reading and some of the music they're listening to, not just for like the sake of listening to it, but the things that really hold on to you psychologically and the things that inspire and motivate you and have you really think about life, right? And like what's your real purpose and what's your goal?
Great. And I think the last question, I'll say it's the last one, but we'll see. We do the show to encourage people from the Caribbean region. And I think one of the hypotheses that I had was because we come from a multicultural place, we relate to many different people a lot easier. And what components of your Caribbean heritage you think have contributed to your success in your career or journey so far?
I think it's exactly that, like exactly what you said. The fact that we are more diverse by default, right? As a region, you know what I mean? Like you look at the Caribbean, like we have, folks from that are Oriental looking, Indian looking, Black, whites, Hispanic looking, right? And then, but we're all in the same place. And so for a lot of us, like, again, diversity is just, it's Tuesday, you know what I mean? Like, it's just another day, we don't really think about it as some other parts in the world do. So when we now spread out and we branch out and go to different parts of the world, people always say, oh, Caribbean people are so nice and they're laid back and they're this and they're that. And I think that's the case because, for us, this is just normal. You know what I mean? Like when I came to college and I walked into a room of all kinds of people, like I had people from Russia and Arabs and Africans and all kinds of stuff. And I was just like, oh, this is Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like it's another day. It's not, I wasn't stressed out about it. I know some people that's different for them. You know what I mean? Particularly like Black Americans, that's a different situation for them, right? And so they react psychologically to that very differently. But for me, it was Tuesday. It was just like, okay, whatever. We linemen, you know what I mean? Like it's what it is. Like I don't really think about it too tough. But I think, socially speaking and professionally speaking, I think that gives us the advantage, right? Because again, like I said earlier, right? Like comfort breeds confidence. I'm already comfortable being around people.
Anybody.
Different types of people. I might not know them. Like I might not know about your culture, or I might not know details about, I don't know, traditions and things of that nature. But me just walking into a room, like I don't feel like, oh my God, like I'm weird or different. You know what I mean? I might not know certain things, but I don't feel uncomfortable asking the question. You see what I'm saying? And so now again, like comfort breeds confidence. We have that confidence now because we're comfortable. And so now again, professionally and personally, just being able to navigate the world, you know what I mean, for us is a little bit easier.
Great. So I wanted to thank you for your time. And I think as I've experienced this conversation, but also now maybe redigesting, summarizing in my head. And I, as I listened to it afterwards, you've dropped some gems. And I think a couple of things I wanted to highlight is a lot of your success in your technical career, let's say, comes from a large part in the psychology or the mental aspect in which you approach your work, but also in addition to your life. And I think most people, when they look at, oh, I want to get to Microsoft, I want to get to this big company, and what do I need to study? And that's only a piece of the puzzle in addition to the time in which you have to dedicate to grow your skills, but also grow your network and grow your clout within a company, outside of the company. So there's lots of things that you shared, and that's the stuff I'm going to hold on to upgrade my own self. And I like the fact that you said, like, you kind of want to be the best person in the room. So I'm silently tagging you, to run behind again,
Yeah, you pick your target, right? Like, okay, that's the target. That's what I'm going for. And like, for me, like, those are micro goals. You know what I mean? Like, the bigger goal is, what do I like? What's the point? You know what I mean? Like, do I want to be a good storyteller. I want to be a leader. I want to be able to have trust, right? And respect. You know what I mean? But then in your journey to that, like, it's like steps, right? Like, I want to get to the roof, but I got to take a step at a time. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you've established, okay, this house is 14 floors tall, or whatever the case, however tall the building is. I want to get to the top of the roof. What are those little steps that I need to take to get to that point from a metaphorical perspective? You know what I mean? So, like, me targeting coworkers subconsciously, and again, not aggressively, is just me being like, okay, these people are good. Like, I want to be better than that. You know what I'm saying? But then again, you have to ask yourself, well, why? Like, why do I care? Why do I want to be better than that? Right. And the fact of the matter is, if again, like, why do I want to be the best basketball player or the best writer or whatever the case is, right? Like one, you want to be able to show like the quality and the potential that you have. But then, again, I'm a father, right? Like, so the things that are important to me is to be able to set examples and to show that we really have no ceiling.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, the last thing I want to do is put limitations on anybody. And I don't want that to be a lesson for my son or my family or anybody else. You know what I mean? I look at the world as we can go as far as we want to go. You know what I mean? There's only so far we can go individually. We can go a lot further together. But, even though that's the case, you know what I mean? I'm still going to push the ceiling as much as I can. And I want folks to look at me and say, Cecil talks a lot of stuff, right? But I like to be the type of person that, like, if I'm saying it, I'm going to prove it to you. Like, I'm going to do it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm here on your show and I'm saying these things, not because, like, I didn't come with a notepad. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to tell Mark all these kind of things. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't have like a pre-show setup situation. This is what I've done, and it's worked. And this is what I choose to continue to do, because this is the psychology that I approach life with. You know what I'm saying? And so again, you as the viewer, the watcher, the listener, have to kind of figure out, well, what's the way that you kind of want to live your life, right? Again, personally, professionally, and then how do you establish balance? Because I think once you establish balance, like, the picture gets a little clearer, and then now you'll know the why. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to be the best, but why, right? Like, I want to do this show, but why, right? Like, I want to be able to travel the world and see people, but why? You know what I mean? Like there's a million whys, right? And you got to be able to answer some of them. You know what I mean? As you're trying to, like, clarify, like, what that psychological picture looks like for you.
Great. Hey man, appreciate your time, and we'll definitely do some follow-ups. And for anyone out there, keep an eye on Cecil and what he's gonna do. And if you want to go work for Stripe, give him a call.
Yeah, hit me up, man. Let me know.
Cool. All right, later.
All right.